Notre Dame fans, Irish Breakdown Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It's Monday, and so we are continuing what we anticipate will be sort of our Monday theme the rest of the year, which is our RTCF show. That means Sean Davis and I get together and we talk recruiting, R, some team topic for Notre Dame, T, and then a college football related, CF, RTCF. So that's what that stands for. And so today, our first two topics, we're going to go team first, actually. So it's going to kind of be a TRCF show today, Sean. We're going to talk about Ja'Juan Seider and Notre Dame and what the latest there is and what this means. And then we're going to talk about the recruiting impact that Ja'Juan Seider should have on Notre Dame. And then our final segment will be taking a look at the 12 playoff teams from last year. What have they lost? What are they coming back? What have they landed? What newcomers they have? And then which teams, and we're going to break it kind of down into what round they lost. So it'll do like the first four will be the teams that lost in the first round. The second round, the teams that lost in the quarterfinals will be part two. And then the four semifinal teams will be the last segment. So we'll say which ones have the best shot and what are the odds for each of these teams making another run at this thing in 2024. So that'll be the topic for today. So Sean, that is what we're going to talk about. But before we begin, man, how are you this fine Monday afternoon?
I'm absolutely fantastic, man. Excited to talk about these topics and get into some mailbag towards the end, hopefully, man.
Yep. We will have a mailbag today. So we've already got a question in from Mark Avalone. So if you guys want to go ahead and throw your mailbag questions in now, Ant VR, I see you posting in the chat today, so I fully expect you to get a mailbag question in there. Don't let me down, man. All right, Benami's in the chat today. Josh Finn's in the chat today. DK, D-Rock Irish is in the chat today. So a lot of people in the chat today. Get those questions in. Put an MB on there for a mailbag or put in a mailbag emoji, and we will address as many as we can for about an hour after the show is over. So get those in. So, Mr. Davis, we're going to kick things off today with some news that broke yesterday that Notre Dame is anticipated to hire Ja'Juan Seider. I reached out to some sources yesterday, and it sounds like this is a done deal. All we're waiting on is just the official, how it is at Notre Dame. Takes a few days for things to kind of get processed and the official word to get out. But my understanding is this deal is done. And Ja'Juan Seider is going to be leaving Penn State University for Notre Dame to be the new running backs coach. We're going to talk a lot about this hire, Sean, but I got to say, I just want to talk first and foremost about my reaction to it, and I want to hear yours because I don't know if it was on the message board or if it was a tweet or a text message, but I remember somebody asking me, do you think Notre Dame should go after Ja'Juan Seider? And I was like, well, I mean, you talk to him. He's one of the best running back coaches in the business, but he's not going to leave Penn State making $850,000 a year. He's one of the highest paid running back coaches. He's going to, I mean, Notre Dame, I think, has the best running back room in college football next year, but the only one you can even argue is on Notre Dame's levels, Penn State's. I mean, they got a heck of a room. I was like, he's not going to leave Penn State to come to Notre Dame. I mean, as much as I would love for him to do so, it's just, but you'd be silly not to make the call. Well, sounds like Marcus Freeman made the call, and it sounds like Ja'Juan Seider was a lot more excited, impressed than maybe we thought he would be in regard to kind of leaving a good situation to come to another situation. So my first thing was shock. Sean, that was my big thing is like, I know Marcus Freeman likes him. He talked to him when back, he was one of the coaches that Coach Freeman talked to back in 2022 when he hired Dylan McCullough. And it was like when Coach McCullough left, I was like, well, it's going to be a downgrade. It's going to be almost impossible. There's like a number of coaches you could count a number of coaches on one hand that you could hire and be like, you didn't miss a beat. It was a very small list. He was on it. And so just my initial reaction was just shock that Notre Dame was able to pull off this kind of hire this offseason, because we just don't see Notre Dame do this very often, Sean, where they get a big-time coach who's already making a lot of money be able to leave the place that he did to come here. And that's exactly what they did. And it's just another example of of Notre Dame is not going to not get a big-time coach that Marcus Freeman wants because of money. That just, it's not going to be the case. Because like there was other coaches that were good coaches that you could have gone and got for way less money. Stan Drayton's an excellent running backs coach. He's currently unemployed. You could have got him with no buyouts, much smaller salary, but Coach Freeman was like, nope, we're going after the best. And if you're going to lose Dylan McCullough, this is the kind of move you make. He's in that small group of guys you make to say, hey, we're going to keep this thing rolling. So that was kind of my reaction to it initially, Shaun, was shock and then excitement, like, wow, this is an absolute like walk-off, bottom of the ninth inning. You're down 3, bases loaded, 3-2 count, game 7 of the World Series, and you knock it out of the park. I mean, this is a big, big, big hire.
And it continues a trend. It continues the trend of what we hear and have been hearing concerning Marcus Freeman. There's profound professional respect across college football and even in the NFL for head coach Marcus Freeman. Whether it was James Blanchard, whether it is the relationship, I believe Al Golden, when he first took the job as defensive coordinator, one of the things he mentioned is that my initial conversation with Marcus Freeman, after that conversation, I knew, yeah, I want to work for this guy. I want to help this young man. And so that is something that is yielding positive fruit on today, yielding good news that this fan base has been looking for since the loss in the national championship game. So, when you get, we can debate who's better, because you're talking about two guys, Dylan McCullough and Coach Ja'Juan, that had the top 2 running back rooms, as you said. So from a recruiting standpoint, someone mentioned it in the chat, he does. He has significant inroads down south, specifically in Florida, where he's from. He's very familiar, also being a player at West Virginia. He's very familiar with the Mid-Atlantic area. And, we're going to get to some of the players that are on the current board that come from those areas. So, it's probably looking really good with how they're going to be able to do in the 26 class. But I think it is definitely a power move by Marcus Freeman, and it speaks to the building respect that he has, especially going back to what you said, another piece of evidence that Notre Dame has his back from a financial standpoint. Right. Fans have worried about that moving forward. I think Notre Dame, with this move, is showing money won't be the option, or won't be an issue, shall I say, when it comes to allowing our coach to go out and get the guys that he wants. And once again, I think this also shows that Marcus Freeman, in his decisions, really wants a staff of people that he has a relationship with or has had previous discussions with, so
there's a familiarity there, and he likes that.
He likes that. He definitely likes
Shaun,
that in
even
his decisions.
portal guys they've gone out and landed are guys that they've seen on film that they've had to scout and evaluate and prepare
or
for
played
and play
against. Yeah.
Exactly. Shaun, I think this, like, there was a comment on the message board about, he goes, getting a move like this makes the Chris Ash hire make even less sense. And I think this requires a quick comment on that.
Okay.
Notre Dame did not settle on Chris Ash. Notre Dame did not take Chris Ash because he was cheap. Like, Marcus Freeman chose Chris Ash because he thinks he was the best guy for the job based on who was available, meaning like they had already talked to Jim Leonard and he wasn't going to take the job. The only debate there about that hire is whether it's a good one or not. They're like, so I just want to make sure that we're making that we're setting the proper discussion points for the DC hire. We can discuss, is this the right decision by Marcus Freeman or not? We can all root that it is the right decision and that this ends up being a home run hire as well. But what we shouldn't debate is whether or not this was a settle move, because you're not going to pay the kind of money that you paid for a running back coach like Ja'Juan Seider and then go out and skimp on a defensive coordinator, especially when your defensive coordinator just left was one of the highest paid assistant coaches in all college football. Coach Freeman made a choice, and we're going to find out here, Shaun, in the next couple of years if it was the right choice. But people need to understand this wasn't a settling on Chris Ash because he couldn't afford to go get so-and-so or so-and-so or so-and-so. I just want to make sure that we're clear on that. So the debate simply needs to be around, do you like the hire or not? Not an example of, well, Notre Dame's going on the cheap. Notre Dame wasn't willing to pay for this coach or that coach or the other coach. That wasn't the case, just so that we're all on the same page. And this move actually shows that, instead of creating concern or question marks about the Ash hire, this should confirm that it was simply Coach Freeman made that choice. And it wasn't a settle move or couldn't afford somebody else. It was, he made a choice, and we all hope that he's right on it. But, we'll find that out. But it wasn't his hands were tied because Notre Dame wouldn't pay the money needed to go get another top coach.
And timing. We talked about timing last week's show and how important it is. Marcus Freeman and the confidence that he has as a head coach now is probably a better fit. Once again, familiarity with Chris Ash from previous conversations. So this is someone he's comfortable with. And Al Golden was just what he needed as a young developing head coach, someone that he could trust to head up his defense and lead the defense that he wants to be at Notre Dame while he becomes acquainted with the offense as a head coach. Well, we have to come to understand this. This is also part of the evolution of Marcus Freeman. He feels comfortable with that hire because of who he is as a head coach now. And he has a better handle on the program and the direction of the program. Doesn't mean that it's a step down, because there were questions about Al Golden when he took the job. He had a better resume because he was coming from the NFL, yet still he hadn't proven certain things on the college level and had not been in the college game for a while. So there were questions
and hadn't coordinated the defense in 17, 18 years.
17, 18 years. There were significant questions about that. Chris Ash is stepping into a situation where he doesn't have to create the culture. The culture is there. He doesn't have to give the defensive direction. The defensive direction is there. He works well with Marcus Freeman. Marcus Freeman respects him, and Marcus Freeman is fully confident as the head coach. It's a totally different situation. If Chris Ash had been the hire maybe 3 years ago, I might be a little bit more hesitant. But right now, I'll give Marcus Freeman a huge leash. Like, go ahead. Like, I'm definitely going to trust you with this hire, because your hires usually have worked out. And I think offensively, it was perfect for him to go get Mike Denbrock as he evolves as a head coach, trying to get a handle on the offensive side of the ball. 5 years from now, if he's still here, having a handle on the offensive side of the ball, he might take a chance on a younger offensive coordinator. It's just timing, and the guy leading the ship, the captain leading the ship, knows what's needed, in my opinion. And so we sit and wait. It all comes down to the performance, right?
Right.
That's what it comes down to.
We just needed to make sure that we set the stage so that people understand why that hire was made, and not which is either it's all going to be on Marcus Freeman if it doesn't work, but it's also all on Marcus Freeman if it does work, because it's going to show like, okay, like he nailed that one too. We'll express our opinions of what we think of the hire, but again, this was Marcus Freeman doing what Marcus Freeman thinks is best for the program, just like you did with Ja'Juan Seider. So now here's some things we don't know about this move. We don't know what titles Ja'Juan Seider is going to have outside of running backs coach. I assume he's going to have more than just running backs coach. I would assume that there's a pay raise involved. He was the assistant head coach and co-offensive coordinator at Penn State, and obviously he'll be heavily involved in the run game. One thing I like about this move, Coach Shaun, with Coach Seider, is he's not a running back. He was a quarterback in college. He played quarterback under Rich Rod, I believe, at West Virginia, and then also played quarterback, I think, at FAMU for a year. He's from Florida. So after West Virginia, he transferred to FAMU for a year. He's coached other positions. He has primarily been a running backs coach, but he's not just a running backs. And I like having a running – and this is something that I think was a big benefit when you had D'Lo McCullough, was you want a running backs coach ideally. A lot of people just with running backs coaches, Shaun, they just go out and hire a guy that's a great recruiter. And then just say, look, man, here's some basic techniques to teach a running back. It's not that hard of a position, and just coach the running backs and go recruit. I believe that and you can get away with that at that position. But I think when you have as many coaches as you have that are really dynamic coaches, the better. and you're hiring a guy that obviously knows how to be part of an impact run game. We have seen that throughout his career at Penn State. You're talking about a guy that was the position coach for Miles Sanders back in 2018, who rushed for over 1,200 yards. He was the running backs coach for Journey Brown. In 2019, you had a year he ran for 6.9 yards per carry on 890 yards, 12 touchdowns. And obviously the last 3 years, he's had Nicholas Singleton and Kaytron Allen, who've been a dynamic 1-2 punch the last couple years. And this past year, both rushed for 1,000 yards. So he knows how to be part of those type of offenses, Shaun. And we saw Penn State this past season make a big jump in the run game after a couple, well, really the last 3 years, but especially the last couple. So like they had that little weird stretch in 20 and 21 where they didn't run the ball for worth at all. Then they jumped up to 181 and then 184. And then this past year, they jumped up to 202 and 5.3 yards per carry. So, and of course they were 200 yards a game, obviously in his first year with Miles Sanders as well. So he's someone that is not just a running backs coach. He's not just a guy that's going to, okay, hey, we like inside zone. Here's how we teach inside zone. You're getting a guy that like Deland McCullough is going to be involved in putting game plans together and have an eye for different things. And I like the fact that, I mean, this could be my bias, but I like the fact he's a former quarterback. So he's going to understand the running back position from a far greater deal than just how it impacts the running back position. He understands the importance of certain aspects of how running back play impacts the quarterback and impacts the whole offense. But we don't know specifically what titles. I would assume, since he's replacing a guy who was also the assistant head coach at Notre Dame, that will be part of it. But that's an assumption I'm making. I don't know that. That hasn't been announced. Notre Dame hasn't officially announced anything. Although, again, we believe that this deal is done. It's just going to be the normal. It's going to take a few days to get everything ironed out and go through all the different checks and just do the process that Notre Dame does. But, you're talking about a guy, Shaun, if we just kind of do a quick background look at him, last 4 years, so from 21 to 24, he's been the assistant head coach and co-OC. In 2020, he was the running backs coach and run game coordinator at Penn State, and then he was just the running backs coach at Penn State in 2018 and 2019. He came to Penn State from the University of Florida, Shaun. So he is a guy that has some Florida roots, but not just because of that one season in 2017, which was not a great year for the University of Florida, by the way. But he's also someone who's from Florida. He's from Belgrade, and he played at West Virginia, as I mentioned. He spent 4 years at his alma mater, West Virginia, from 2013 to 2016. He was the running backs coach at Marshall from 2010 to 12, and he was a GA at Florida, West Virginia from 2008, 2009. That was, I think, the Bill Stewart era. That had been right after Rich Rod left. And then from 06 to 07, he was the quarterbacks coach at Lake Worth High School in Florida. From 03 to 05, he was the offensive coordinator at Palm Beach Lakes in Florida. And then 01 to 02, he was the running backs coach at Glade Central. So that was back in his hometown. As I mentioned, he is from Belglade, Florida. And so obviously he has those Florida ties. We'll talk more about that, Shaun, when we get to the recruiting section of today's show. But I did think it was worth kind of going over his resume. You're a guy that at Penn State, you look at where he's recruited, a lot of his running backs are from Pennsylvania, which is a very important area for Notre Dame. Obviously, you got Nicholas Singleton out of Pennsylvania. I believe there was one other running back that they got out of Pennsylvania. It was and then obviously Messiah Mickens who's in the 2026 class, which we'll talk about. Miles Sanders was from the state of Pennsylvania, although he did not recruit Miles Sanders. He did coach Miles Sanders from Pennsylvania. But he's also gone down into Virginia to get players, and he's got some running backs from Florida. Kaytron Allen was from IMG. Obviously, Noah Kane was played at IMG as well, so he's gone down south as well. But when you coach at Penn State, Shaun, you are going to develop ties in Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Virginia, which are three very important areas for Notre Dame in recruiting. So we'll dive more into that here when we get into the recruiting section. But that's just just an overview of sort of who he is and his background, but where he's really made his living and built his reputation, Shaun, is as an outstanding running backs coach. And sometimes running back coaches are a lot like cornerback coaches, Shaun. When they're dynamic recruiters, there's an automatic assumption that they are considered really good coaches because of the recruiting ability. But you and I have both talked to a lot of people the last 24 hours since this 26 hours since this really started to break. And what you hear from people is he fits the entire Notre Dame culture of what Marcus Freeman's looking for, in that, yes, he can recruit, but he's an outstanding position coach and he's a culture fit. I talked to someone I know very close to the situation who was like, yes, he's an excellent coach, but he's also a real good guy. And he's going to fit there. He's a fit at Notre Dame. And I talked to somebody else who's a Pennsylvania person who knows what Notre Dame's all about, what Marcus Freeman's about, and he's like, perfect fit for what they're for what they want to do. And then, of course, Shaun, I know you talked to somebody else who was like, I didn't know that you were going to be able to replace a guy like Dylan McCullough with somebody on his level, and that's exactly what Notre Dame did. So why don't you share that?
Yeah, absolutely. Just spoke with a couple of people, and they echoed some of the sentiments that you just shared about his characteristics and who he is as a man and how he's a great fit for Notre Dame. But even more than that, they just talk about his ability to coach, his ability to recruit. And it's very interesting to me because, once again, I point back to what I said previously about Marcus Freeman. And I think Marcus Freeman and who he is, and something to think about, first year with new offensive coordinator. Like, what goes into a decision for a man who literally, I don't know if he played a part in both of the running backs at Penn State choosing to come back. I'm sure there was a conversation. But to have that conversation and for both of those guys to commit to coming back, Katron Allen, Nicholas Singleton, and then you take a job elsewhere, I'm sure there had to be some things that were a little bit different, because I'm sure he didn't want to leave the kids that he brought there. I'm sure he wanted to finish off with them. But for some reason, Marcus Freeman, of course, Notre Dame, the brand, all of that. But I just think comfortability, looking at the staff, I heard that he had a conversation with Coach McCullough.
Coach Seider?
Yes.
Okay.
He reached out, had a couple of questions, got those answered.
Shaun, that would not shock me one bit, knowing Dylan McCullough.
Yeah.
Knowing how he views the profession, but also with how he feels about the kids in his room that he left behind.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just say this, Shaun. I mean, you know who I talked to. That was the hard part for Dylan McCullough.
Yeah.
That was the thing that made him think about, do I really want to do this?
Mm-hmm.
Was the kids in the room. At the end of the day, when you're a coach like him, you're always going to have that problem, because if Jeremiah Jadarian left last year, then he'd have the same struggle next year with Kedron and Aeneas and Nolan James and those type of Jabron Payne. And so that's always going to be an issue. So at the end of the day, it's off-season time. You got to do what's best for you and your family. But knowing how he feels about Notre Dame, knowing how he feels about the other staff members at Notre Dame, and especially knowing how he feels about the young men in that room, I promise you that he is going to be someone who's going to be like, if I can help you go get somebody that's big time to replace me, I'm going to do it, because that's what's best for those kids in that room. So that does not shock me at all that Dylan McCullough would do that at all.
Yeah.
Like, I'd have been surprised if he didn't, to be completely honest with you. Knowing Coach McCullough.
Great vibes. But once again, looking at that from the point of view of Dylan McCullough, now it just really gets the wheels turning as to, man, what went into Ja'Juan Seider making this decision and saying, you know what, I think I feel better going over to Notre Dame and coaching that room than staying with the guys that I recruited. Like, he had to go through the same process and think about some of the same things that Dylan McCullough had to think about. And he made the move to leave as well as Dylan McCullough. So Dylan McCullough, with his decision, it was familiarity. I believe his dad coached with Coach Carroll, done some other things. And I'm just very interested as we get to meet him and hear from him down the road what that thought process was like. From the Penn State side,
his dad coaches Seattle. I don't know if it was with Pete Carroll, but I know he coached with the Seahawks.
I think they did have, if I'm not mistaken, I'll double check that. But just to end it, from the Penn State side, they're looking at this as a really bad loss.
They're losing it. They're losing it.
It is a huge loss on the coaching side. It's probably a bit of shock, as to why. And some of the fans and some of the people that are writers over there that cover the Nittany Lions are calling it a lateral move. And
I mean, it
nothing
is. I
beats.
mean, it is in regard to you're not going to get an upgrade. There's no upgrade for him to have on the staff. There's no positional upgrade. I mean, you left a Final Four team to go coach for another Final Four team. You left a loaded running back room to go coach another running back room. Like, it is a lateral move. But we see this a lot of times, Shaun, when you're at a place a certain period of time and you're just, this is my role, there's nowhere else to go. You got to look and say, maybe another place presents me an opportunity. It's a similar reason why Tony Alford left Notre Dame. It's a similar, and when you look at Notre Dame, Shaun, if you're someone who's looking at career advancement, the last two running back coaches left Notre Dame to become an offensive coordinator at Louisville and the highest paid running backs coach in all of football with the Las Vegas Raiders and working for Pete Carroll. And then, of course, Lance Taylor did that offensive coordinator role for a year at Louisville, and then that bayoued him into being the head coach at Western Michigan. And he took his team to a bowl game this year. And running back coaches, it's a tough position to really have the kind of jump and growth. Like, there's a lot of times there's a ceiling on running back coaches because of the way the position is viewed. And you want to go to a place that has shown that you can leave for you. There's growth beyond Notre Dame, whereas Penn State hasn't exactly shown that their coaches are going to get those opportunities, or at least he hasn't been able to get that opportunity. There's been some, Ricky Rain and Manny Diaz, but not the position coaches like him. So I think that's got to be part of it too. Is like, look, I've been here. We've done what we can do, and it's time for a new opportunity. And from what I was told, it was time. He wanted out. His family wanted out. It was just time to move on. Not that I haven't heard anything like, oh, he hated James Franklin. I mean, if you hated James Franklin, he wouldn't have been there the last 7 years. He wouldn't have stayed as long as he did if this was like screw James Franklin kind of thing. I have not heard anything like that from anyone credible. And I just think sometimes it's like, look, and I think it speaks to, I can say playing for Marcus Freeman has a level of attractiveness to it that doesn't necessarily mean the guy you're leaving behind is someone that you dislike. It's just like, I've heard from a lot of people, Shaun, and I'll tell you, I spoke with someone who had a chance to maybe come to Notre Dame this offseason. It didn't work out for him. And what he said to me was like, direct quote. Actually, I'm going to pull it up. I'm going to pull up my text message, Shaun, and I'm going to give you the direct quote that he gave me. Not the whole quote, but this is what he said to me. He goes, Marcus Freeman is about to go on a Saban-like run in South Bend. Now, I don't know that that's going to happen. I mean, I've made my statement of how difficult that is in today's era. I'm simply making that statement not to get hyperbolic and be like, hey guys, this guy said that. It's more so what the perception is about what he's building at Notre Dame. And there's people that want to be on board with that. And when you're in a situation where, like, I've done everything I can at this place, let me go try something new, then I can understand why he would make this kind of move without it being something where there's some sort of negative in the other place.
Right.
That's my thing. Sometimes you just want a new challenge. Your family wants a new challenge, or there's just a better fit somewhere. Because I'm sure I'm confident saying that Notre Dame gave him a pay raise. It wasn't that much, because he was already one of the highest paid running back coaches in the business. He was already making $850,000 at Penn State.
Mm-hmm.
So I think those volumes.
But no, I think he brings incredible energy from what I hear. Definitely, we'll see the type of guys, because I think even in recruiting, you have preferences, right? Everyone's different, right? So you can have the same list. For example, the kids we're going to go over in the 26 class. Dylan McCullough might have had somebody higher on the pecking order. And Ja'Juan Seider might come in and be like, no, I like this kid better. Or, so those are the small little nuances that we'll learn about him in due time. But other than that, it's a great hire. Great hire by Marcus Freeman. I think it speaks volumes for that room. Somebody told me, look, hiring coordinators is always the more difficult task anywhere. He said, but a place like Notre Dame, you're going to get the best of the best. Like if you have a head coach that knows what he's doing, you're going to get the best of the best to come to Notre Dame, more than likely. And it wasn't a surprise. This person wasn't as surprised as some of us were that Ja'Juan Seider ended up making the move from Penn State to Notre Dame. And I think that's based upon what you just said. Talking about what Marcus Freeman is building and what
Right.
people are perceiving it to be across the college football landscape.
I think that's a big thing, Shaun. And because my question actually, and this is why I mute myself, because then I can't always just interject whenever I want to. I can hold on, stop, let him finish, because you answered what I was going to ask you. Why? Why was this person not surprised? And that's what you said, is because I do think there's a level of, Marcus Freeman's a guy you want to work for. And not only just because of what he's doing, but you look at some of the opportunities his assistant coaches have gotten since they've left Notre Dame. His first offensive coordinator left to be the OC at Bama, and he's now an OC in the NFL 3 years later. His first defensive coordinator just got promoted to be the defensive coordinator of the Bengals, Cincinnati Bengals. His second offensive coordinator left to become the head coach at Troy, a team who was coming off of a 10 or 11 win season, a really good, group of 5 program. You look at Brian Mason getting the opportunity after 1 year with Marcus Freeman to go from being a special teams coach with the Cincinnati Bearcats in the AAC to 2 years later, because of his time in Notre Dame, he's the special teams coach of the Indianapolis Colts, making good money. And so you see those things, Shaun, where you're seeing these opportunities coming up for these assistant coaches that are allowing them to make these kind of big jumps. Chad Bowden comes here as the GM. He's now making over $1 million, and USC went and paid him a ton of money to come there. So when you look at those different things, Shaun, it's you're seeing people working with Marcus Freeman and then jumping to better opportunities, and that matters to coaches. That absolutely matters to coaches. And look, word spreads quickly in the profession if a coach is not helping you get to that point in time. Getting to that point. And yeah. he what we have seen from him is he has been able to John McNulty also, I think, left for an NFL job too, right? Didn't he leave for an NFL job after his first year? So I look at all those things, Shaun, and you understand why this job is attractive. And that leads us back to the DC thing. Is I don't believe that, Jim Leonard, I'm confident, wasn't as interested as maybe we would have hoped he was, but that's just because he wants to stay in the NFL. He turned down other big-time programs as well so far. But, that was a hire he made because he feels that's the right move, not because there was a lack of top candidates. And so BC, that's right. He went to BC as the OC? The OC at BC. OC, that's right. Yeah. So his tight ends coach left to go be the offensive coordinator at Boston College. Thank you, Michael, for that. Michael Johnson just reminded me of that. I couldn't remember for the life of me. But yes, so, you're seeing a lot of Marcus Freeman's coaches getting promotions pretty quickly. Actually, John McNulty was not on his first staff. Oh, no, he left after 2021, so he was not part of that. So scratch that one. That was a bad example.
Yeah. But yeah, Sherman, by the way, Sherman Smith was on that staff from 2010 to 2017. Staff? Yeah.
Okay, so he was on the Super Bowl team in 2013.
Yes.
Okay, I just hurts my heart a little bit because I'm still mad at that Seahawks team in 2013 for the beatdown they gave the Broncos that year. So, but end of the day, Shaun, this is a big hire. This is someone who's known as a strong position coach, which is important. This is a coach that meets like you and I said the other day. You need to find a coach that obviously cares about developing young men. Everything we've heard is that he checks that box. So the off the field part matters to him. It's what we heard. Now, of course, you got to do it at Notre Dame, and we got to see it firsthand. But we're just telling you kind of things we've heard. Number 2, you need someone who has a level of expertise as a position coach that can develop players. It clearly checks that box with the success he's had at Penn State just the last 7 years. And you needed someone that was a strong recruiter. But one of the key ingredients for me was you needed someone who knew how to use multiple backs. That wasn't one of those guys that just, you got your number one back and your number one back's going to just dominate all the reps and dominate all the opportunities. We didn't see that from him this year. Now I would say two backs dominated this season because that's what they needed. And that's, I mean, honestly, when you have those two backs, you're not going to play a whole lot of other guys, if we're being honest about it. But we have seen in past years where they have used multiple backs effectively. But this is a coach that understands, that has shown the need to say, look, I can have two stud running backs and use both of them. And he understands riding the hot hand, finding different roles for the backs. They didn't ask Ja'Juan Allen to do the exact same stuff that Nicholas Singleton did. We also saw him over the years. We saw Penn State more and more and more use their running backs in the pass game. Now, that's more of an offensive coordinator thing. No matter how much you teach your backs to be good in the pass game, if they're not in an offense that promotes that, you're not going to see that. So, 2022 under Yurcich, they didn't do that a whole lot. So his running backs caught like 31, 36, 38 passes, 40, 41. And then this past year, we saw a coach that does that a lot more. And Nicholas Singleton had 41 catches by himself for 375 yards and 5 touchdowns. And then Ja'Juan Allen had 18 catches for 153 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then his other backs had 4 catches on the season. So this is someone who's shown, hey, we're going to have backs do a lot of different things. What does that mean for the specific running backs in the room? Will roles look exactly like they did last year? That we don't know, Sean. We don't know how that's going to play out. But what we do know is that they did hire someone that I believe, and you and I have talked about, they needed to hire someone who understood how to keep an entire room engaged and using a variety of skill sets in the backfield. And that's a very important piece to this puzzle as well.
I think I'm going to be very honest right here. As he inherits this Notre Dame running back room, there are two ways that this situation can go, right? I think he comes into a room where roles are already established. I think roles are already established in a sense. And that's not just with the top two. You can throw Aeneas Williams into that, right? So now, does Kedron Young look at this as, okay, it's a new coach, it's a new opportunity? Like, is this coach coming in saying, hey, I know the top two, but we're going to see. That's what's going to be interesting for me going into the spring and watching spring practices. Not the top 2 or 3 guys. What is Kedron? Is Kedron Young now going harder because he feels like now he really has an opportunity, rather than waiting in the pecking order if Dylan McCullough had remained? And I think Dylan McCullough would have recognized if he had done the work and taken over. He definitely probably would have gotten more carries and more opportunity. I think he would have gotten more carries and more opportunities had he not been hindered by the injury, when he came in. So it's going to be very interesting. It's almost like, I don't want to take it that far because I was about to say, spring is going to be very important to giving a vision to Kedron Young because I think he had the vision through Dylan McCullough to believe in. But I think that that's the one running back in the room that I'm really going to watch going into the spring. Like, I want to see his body language. I want to see how he moves. I want to see how he's being coached. I want to see how they use him in the spring game. All of that, because that's a young man that I think is probably going to need a vision to hear and see a vision of the running back room moving forward, where other guys pretty much know they have their roles, and the vision should be clear. Like, hey, you're the next 2 up. These 2 are more than likely leaving.
If you're Kedron, who Sean, my stance on him, I think he's a stud. You've got to look at Penn State and be like, I kind of look like that guy, except I'm a little bit more explosive. Like, I was having this debate with somebody the other day, and they're like, Kenny Moore, my guy, love Kenny. But he said, look, I think I think that Ja'Juan Allen is better than Jadarian Price. And I was like, yeah, I don't know about that. I think he was used more. But Jadarian was way over 6 yards a carry. Kedron's at 5.0. You know, if you put, his stats out over the same type of usage, I mean, if you just look at his numbers against top teams, Ja'Juan had like over twice as many yards and on half the carries almost, just it's like that's a usage thing. Yards is a usage thing, but Kaytron Allen's a really good running back, no doubt. But I just think Jadarian Price is too. But if you're Keidron Young, you're looking at him because Jadarian and Kaytron Allen are comparisons in regard to who the perceived number 2 back is. Keidron's got to look at that one a little bit different because with Keidron, it's like that guy is built like me. He plays like me. Now, I think, again, like I said, I think Keidron is a better player coming out of high school. I think Keidron has the more natural talent. But it's nice knowing a coach has coached a guy like you and had a lot of success with a guy like you and has shown a willingness to say, I'll use the big boy to be the lead back and then use the faster guy as more of the change of pace back, which is what Penn State did this year. I mean, Kaytron Allen was their, I don't want to say number 1 back because it was really 1A, 1B. But he was the guy that got more of the touches. And then Nicholas was able to come in and be that dynamic, guy from a carry standpoint. So Kaytron Allen this year had 220 carries, 13.8 per game. Nicholas Singleton was at 172 carries in one fewer game at 11.5 per game. And so I think if you're Keidron, you see that. But to your point, Shaun, he's going to be a guy that's going to have to be sat down and say, hey, here's how I see you. Here's your role. Here's your plan. And let's go into the spring that way. Because my only question about Ja'Juan Seider is this. You always get concerned about coaches and this isn't about him in specific, this is about all new coaches. There are some coaches that come into a job and say, okay, I'm not really concerned about building up the young guys on the roster. I'm going to coach the vets that I have, and then I'm going to go recruit my guys to follow them. That's a risk that happens with some position coaches. I'm not saying he's that way. I'm simply saying that's what I have seen doing this as long as I have. Yeah, I'll coach the young guys. We saw that with certain positions at Notre Dame. Well, I'll coach the veterans I have, but when it comes to the younger guys, I'm going to coach the guy. I'm going to develop the guys that I brought in, not the guys that I inherited. We've seen a couple positions at Notre Dame recently, in my opinion. I won't say who it is because I'm not trying to start that, but you know what 2 positions I'm talking about, Shaun. So that's going to be my thing is, will he look at this and say, dude, I am blessed. I'm not only walking into a situation where I have great backs for 2025, but I have great backs for 2026 and 2027 and 2028. Like, this thing is going to keep on rolling. And then I can recruit some guys and have it brought in and all that type of stuff. But that's a general unknown that is true for every new coach that we don't know, that we haven't seen do it at Notre Dame. It's not something that's necessarily specific to him. You could say that about every single coach that was hired. We could have said that about Marcus Freeman when he was hired as the coordinator. We could have said it about Mike Mickens. We could have said it about Harry Easton. This is true of every coach when they get hired, is how are they going to handle what they inherit versus what they're going to bring in. And that's going to be very, very interesting to see. So that's kind of the final piece there, Shaun. We're going to get into recruiting next. But before we do, folks, y'all know what to do. See that little thumbs up button below there? Right now, as we're doing this, it takes you, there's 584 people in the chat, so that we should at least have 584 likes. Do us a favor, real quick, right under the screen that you're looking at, either on your phone or on your computer. You just look down. It takes you 3 seconds to hit that thumbs up button for us. Only hit it once, because if you hit it twice, it's going to undo it. So just hit it once. Hit that like. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you hit that notification bell. Share this podcast with your friends and family, not just sharing it where you can actually hit a share option, but to let people know that we had someone come over and do an inspection in our house today. He's a listener of the show. Really appreciate you being by today and taking good care of our house. We appreciate that very much. But go ahead and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. And of course, Shaun, as always, make sure you sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com.